It happens in a fraction of a second. One moment, you are here. You are breathing. You are worrying about your bills, your reputation, your dinner plans. And then, in the blink of an eye, the noise stops. The heart halts. The screen goes black. But then, the lights come back on. Most of us terrifyingly assume that death is like falling asleep. But according to one of the most mystical figures of the 20th century, death isn't a sleep. It is an awakening. A violent, sudden, and irreversible awakening. Padre Pio, the Italian saint who bore the open wounds of the crucifixion on his hands and feet for 50 years, claimed to have seen what happens in that precise millisecond of crossover. He didn't describe a courtroom with a judge and a jury. He described something far more haunting. He described a mirror. He witnessed the exact moment a human soul realizes, I am no longer alive. And what he saw in that moment of realization changes everything we think we know about being a good person. Because in that split second, the soul doesn't just see God, it sees itself. Truly. Nakedly. For the first time. To understand why we should take this seriously, you have to understand who this man was. Francesco Forgione, known to the world as Padre Pio, wasn't just a priest. He was a living anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of the modern world. For half a century, science couldn't explain why his hands bled fresh blood every day without infection or healing. But the physical wounds were the least of it. People didn't flock to his monastery in San Giovanni Rotondo just to see a miracle worker. They went because they were terrified of him. They believed he possessed the reading of hearts. You couldn't lie to him. You couldn't hide. There are thousands of documented testimonies of people standing in his confessional line, trembling, only to have him look at them with piercing dark eyes and reveal sins they had committed 20 years ago. Sins they had buried so deep they had forgotten them themselves. He lived with one foot on earth and the other in the supernatural realm. He spoke to angels as casually as we speak to our neighbors. He claimed to see the dead walking up the mountain to his friary. So when a man like this tells you what happens when you die, you listen. So what actually happens? The Catholic Church calls it the particular judgment. But that phrase sounds bureaucratic. It sounds like a DMV appointment. Padre Pio described it as an instantaneous illumination. Imagine walking into a room that is pitch black, and suddenly a floodlight of infinite brightness is turned on. There is nowhere to hide. In our earthly lives, we are masters of spin. We are lawyers for our own defense. We say, I shouted at my wife because I was tired, or I cheated on that tax form because the government is corrupt. We wrap our sins in layers of context and excuses until they look innocent. But Padre Pio taught that at the moment of death, the context evaporates. The excuses dissolve. You are left with the raw data of your life. You see your actions exactly as God sees them. And this leads us to the most disturbing vision attributed to the saint. A story that serves as a terrifying warning to everyone watching this who considers themselves a decent person. The story goes that God allowed Padre Pio to witness the judgment of a specific soul. Now brace yourself, because this soul wasn't a murderer. He wasn't a dictator. He wasn't an atheist mocking God. This was a man who, by all accounts, was a good Catholic. He went to Mass on Sundays. He was respected in his community. He said his prayers. If you met him at a dinner party, you would think, this guy is going to heaven. But in the vision, as this man stood in the light of truth, he was damned. Why? How is that possible? The cause wasn't a massive, flashy crime. It was a secret, a single, habitual, unrepented sin that he had hidden behind his public image. Maybe it was a bitter grudge he refused to let go of. Maybe it was a secret dishonesty in his business. Maybe it was a private addiction he nurtured while judging others. The specific sin doesn't matter as much as the psychology behind it. This man had lived a double life. He had compartmentalized his heart. He gave God 90% of his life, but he walled off that last 10% and said, "This is mine. Do not touch this." The tragedy that broke Padre Pio's heart wasn't just that the man was lost. It was the shock on the soul's face. The realization. In that final instant, the man realized that his good reputation meant nothing. He realized that his church attendance was just a wrapper. He realized that by holding on to that one piece of darkness, by refusing to surrender it, he had slowly, quietly, over decades, turned his heart to stone. He hadn't rejected God with a shout. He had rejected him with a shrug. He had chosen his sin over his Creator, day after day, until it became his identity. This is the good enough trap. It is the single most dangerous state for a human soul. Padre Pio often warned against this spiritual lukewarmness. It's the belief that because we aren't bad people, we are safe. We think God grades on a curve. We think, well, I'm better than my neighbor, so I'm fine. But the vision reveals a brutal truth. God doesn't grade on a curve. He grades on love. And you cannot love God while willfully holding on to something you know He hates. The devil doesn't need you to worship him. He just needs you to be indifferent. He needs you to be comfortable. He needs you to say, I'll deal with that later. But then, later runs out. The clock stops, and you are left with what you became. This is heavy. It's terrifying. But Padre Pio didn't share these insights to paralyze us with fear. He shared them to wake us up. He was a doctor diagnosing a fatal disease so that the patient could take the cure before it was too late. And he left us a very specific blueprint for a holy death, a survival guide for the soul. His prescription was radical, but simple. First, he waged war on the idea that confession is just for big sinners. He famously said, "Even a clean and unoccupied room gathers dust. Return after a week and you will see that it needs dusting again." He urged weekly confession. He saw the confessional not as a place of judgment, but as a bath for the soul. It is the only place on earth where we can reset the clock, where we can confront those secret sins before they confront us at the judgment. Second, he taught the twice-daily review. He treated the soul like a business. No shopkeeper closes the register without checking the receipts. Pio advised a quick check at noon and a check at night. Where did I fail today? Where was I selfish? This prevents the drift. It keeps the conscience sharp, so we don't fall into the delusion of being good enough. And finally, he gave us the ultimate weapon. Pray, hope, and don't worry. This wasn't a catchy slogan for a coffee mug. It was a command. Worry is useless because it relies on the self. Prayer is powerful because it relies on God. He taught that if we offer our daily struggles, our headaches, our heartbreaks, our frustrations, and unite them with the suffering of Christ, we are purifying our souls right here, right now. The life of Padre Pio forces us to look in the mirror. It forces us to ask the uncomfortable question, if the lights went out right now, if this was the last minute of my life, what would I see in that flash of realization? Would I see a stranger? Or would I see a child of God coming home? The good news is you are still breathing. The screen hasn't gone black yet. The realization is coming. But the ending of your story isn't written yet. You hold the pen. Padre Pio's warning is clear, but his invitation is louder. Don't wait for the final moment to find out who you are. Decide who you are right now.